没有，来随便拿。这个副题是这个跟那个副，
他这边有写。
接下来我们要邀请祖育文化乐舞团为我们带来精彩的开场。
测试123。
我想请问一下，你的这个的声音手关掉了吗？笔电的声音吗？现在纯粹我的。
表演也为原住民歌谣注入新的音乐曲风，
纯粹是我机器的声音吗？
最美丽的文化。
你现在声音没有进来啊？
声音没有进来，不可能。
你声音没有进来。
不可能，我声音有。你关掉的是哪里的声音？我有声音，而且很清楚。你要不要听听看？
请大家以掌声欢迎祖育文化。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 祖育 culture。
你关掉的是哪里的声音？你那个是不是电脑的声音啊？
谢谢祖韵文化为我们带来精彩的演出。Thank you for that wonderful performance by 祖韵 Culture。现在让我们邀请主办单位行政院海洋委员会的李仲威主委上台致开幕词。And now we would like to invite Minister of Ocean Affairs, Mr. 李仲威 to give us the opening remarks。请大家以热烈的掌声欢迎李主委。Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Minister Lee。
喂，各国驻台代表、各界专家学者，对，你要再高一点，因为主委比我高。各国驻台代表、各界专家学者、各位贵宾，大家早安，大家好。OK。
国民听得到吗？国民听得到吗？
各国驻台代表听得到吗？后面的。
国民 OK 吗
？OK 好 ，OK 啊 ，OK。
谢谢。好，接下来。
谢谢主委，我们请主委留步在台上，因为接下来我们要合影。We now like to invite some guests of honor to the stage for a group photo together to remember this special event today. 接下来呢，我们要邀请几位贵宾上台合影，为今天的研讨会留下珍贵的画面。First of all, we would like to welcome Professor Elaine Chang from University of Hawaii at Manoa.Next, please welcome Professor Eric Franks, Flay Université Brussels. Hello, 你们怎么了？现在。是谁？等一下，再一次，你先放下，你先把人找齐。他该做什么事情呢？他就是要在这边 stand by 了。是谁？等一下，从那个祖韵表演完那一趴开始。
你要请到时候要搬的那4位在现场，你不要人换来换去，到时候都不知道做什么，就请等一下要搬的4位就过来，他们去了哪里？
结果，没关系，这我刚刚因为专业都讲过，已经是谁过，要固定啊，对。
因为时间点要抓得很准，不要主持人要 cue 了，他们都没动作，因为接着贵宾就上去了，不可以让贵宾等，也不可以让观众看着他们一直在搬东西。所以我要主运完人就已经把这些东西搬在这里等着上去了，因为他接着 Q 的人就已经要站上去台子。好，来，开始。
他们来了吗？人来了吗？有办法吗？现在？
一定要4位。
从马来西亚的，他说大概要有新的
那个维轩处理一下那个 PPT。
要改一下学经历，不，职衔，待会儿。
好。
好了吗？好了，可以了吗？好，那主韵表演完就站着在这里stand by。OK。
从祖韵表演完哦 ，Hello， 祖韵表演完，所以那边要有人移那个。
表演完的是
长官支持完吗？
长官支持。
那让我。
OK， 好，长官支持完，你们等就要。
等一下，对不起，祖韵，因为你刚那一趴就是也是你自己去搬的，到时候不可能是你吧？
有人在那边。
对，我们从祖韵。
好，那你现在还是播放的。
等一下哦，等一下哦，主运结束了，谢谢他们下台。你看他们走了，你们才可以推，要听我这边讲哈。好，从主运表演完，谢谢主运文化为我们带来精彩的演出。Thank you for that wonderful performance by 主运 Culture。现在让我们邀请行政院海洋委员会的李仲威主委上台致开幕词。And now we would like to invite Minister of Ocean Affairs, Mr. 李仲威, to give us the opening remarks. 请大家以热烈的掌声欢迎李主委。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Minister Lee. 有人会去引导主委吗？现在要做，现在彩排就要把那动作做出来。
各国驻台代表、各界专家学者、各位贵宾，大家早安，大家好。首先，仅代表海洋委员会感谢各位今日的莅临，在此向各位致上最诚挚的欢迎及感谢之意。OK。
谢谢主委，我们请主委留步在台上，因为接下来要合影。We now like to invite some guests of honor to the stage for a group photo together to remember this special event today. 接下来呢，我们要邀请几位贵宾来到台上，为今天的研讨会留下珍贵的画面。好。今天呢，有许多的贵宾从海外来到我们当中，和我们在研讨会当中分享。因此呢，我们现在就要邀请这些贵宾一起来到台上合影。And now please welcome to the stage Professor Elaine Chang, University of Hawaii at Manoa. Welcome. Next, we would like to welcome to the stage Professor Eric Franks, Fleur Université Brusseau.Mr. Martin Sebastian, Director of Maritime Institute of Malaysia. Mr. Bill Hayton, Associate Research Fellow of Chatham House. Captain Dr. Gurpreet Khurana, Executive Director of the National Maritime Foundation. Mr. Hajin Jala, Founder of Center for Southeast Asian Studies.Next, please welcome Dr. Ann Cohen, Associate Scientist with Tenure of Climate and Paleo Group. 这边的音乐要小声一点，因为会把我的声音盖过，听不清楚他们的名字。Professor Elaine Borizon, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Dr. James Davis Raymer, Associate Professor with Tenure from University of the Duke.Dr. Patrick Corin, Chair of Asia Pacific Security of Hudson Institute. Mr. Nguyen Hong Son, Acting Director of Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. And please welcome Dr. Michael Perrin from University of Oxford School of Archaeology. 再来让我们欢迎海委会庄庆达副主委，海委会蔡清标副主委，海委会海巡署陈国恩署长。海委会海洋保育署黄向文署长，海委会国家海洋研究院邱永芳代理院长，海委会刘国烈主任秘书。And next, please welcome Ambassador of Kiribati, Her Excellency Tessa Lambourne. Next, please welcome Ms. Catherine Nettleton, Representative of British Office in Taipei. Ms. Suzanne Wang, Deputy Branch Chief of AIT Kaohsiung Branch Office.同时，我们也欢迎内政部营建署吴新修署长，欢迎各位贵宾来到台上。好，请所有的贵宾一起看您中间的摄影镜头。Ladies and gentlemen, please look at the cameras in the center together. Thank you very much. 谢谢所有贵宾的配合，请大家回座。Thank you for joining the photo shoot. 好。 束。等一下是谁搬？那边谁啊？不可能是他吧？他还没来。好。 各位来宾，大家早安！2019年东沙国际研讨会在几分钟后即将开始，在这边邀请各位入座。今天我们演讲内容将以中文和英文来进行，大会有提供中英文的同步口译服务，场外备有接收器，请凭着您的个人证件租借。频道5是中文，频道7是英文。提醒您，为了维护会议的品质，也请记得将您的手机转为静音模式，谢谢。Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2019 International Dongsha Conference. The event will begin shortly. Please take your seats. Simultaneous interpretation service is provided in the conference today. Channel 5 is Mandarin Chinese and Channel 7 is English. And please remember to switch your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you. Hello. 各位来宾，大家早安，大家好，欢迎各位莅临由行政院海洋委员会所主办的2019年东沙国际研讨会。我是大会的司仪 Angela 卢怡君。Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to join us at 2019 International Dongsha Conference, hosted by the Ocean Affairs Council of Taiwan. I'm your MC today. My name is Angela Lu. 本次的研讨会集结了台湾和全球各国的专家学者，就海洋的议题来进行交流，分享知识以及经验。同时呢，在我们的会议当中，也将探讨东沙岛的海洋政策、生态保育以及科学研究的未来方向。希望能够透过与国际学者的交流，让台湾也能够在国际海洋事务当中扮演重要的角色，积极的参与相关的国际组织。The 2019 International Dongsha Conference brings together experts and scholars from Taiwan and countries across the globe for exchanges on maritime and marine issues. Through the sharing of knowledge and experience, the conference will explore future directions for ocean policy, ecological restoration, and scientific research concerning the Dongsha Island. We hope the conference will also highlight Taiwan's firm commitment to playing a constructive role in the above-mentioned issues and participating actively in related international organizations. 大会一开始，首先让我们一起来欣赏一段影片，一起来认识东沙群岛。To begin with, let's watch a short video together introducing Dongsha Island. 请播放。
The Dongsha Atoll, situated in the north of the South China Sea and shaped like a moon, is 25 kilometers in diameter and 500 square kilometers in size. It is formed by hermatific corals over tens of millions of years. Around the atoll, Dongsha Island is the only area above sea level. It is geostrategically significant and belongs to Qijing District, Kaohsiung City. Dongsha, a coral island, is characterized by its atoll landscape, a large sweep of seagrass meadow, a variety of fish species, and vibrant coral colonies. And given the fantastic habitats it owns, such as lagoons, pristine seas, and intertidal zones, makes Dongsha a perfect midway stop for migratory birds. The Dongsha Atoll National Park was designated on January 17, 2007. In light of the geostrategic importance, marine resources, biodiversity, and marine archaeological values, it demonstrates that the Taiwan government hoped to do its part for research and conservation of marine ecology. 2019 International Dongsha Conference encourages Taiwan's experts and scholars for international participation and their involvement in ocean affairs, so that Taiwan could play an even more significant role in oceanic issues and be an integral part in international society. Covers a wide range of oceanic topics, including law and policy, maritime safety and security, science and research, industry, culture, ecology, as Taiwan's economy is largely dependent upon the oceans, with rich resources and diverse functions, oceans are an integral part of Taiwan's development. The Ocean Affairs Council was established on April 28, 2018, to better coordinate the country's marine-related affairs. We are committed to the protection of marine resources, maritime safety, and the sustainable development of oceans. We also welcome experts and scholars from Australia, Belgium, Canada, Indonesia, India, Malaysia, the Philippines, the UK, the USA, and Vietnam, to be an ocean country of ecology, safety, and prosperity. Welcome to join us at 2019 International Dongsha Conference.
接下来，我们要邀请祖韵文化乐舞团为我们带来精彩的开场表演。 祖韵文化乐舞团成立至今已经有18年的历史，他们演出的足迹踏遍世界各地。从祖韵的表演当中，各位可以看到台湾原住民不同族别的祭典仪式、生活风俗和服装的特色。他们的表演也为原住民歌谣注入新的音乐曲风，让大家欣赏到台湾最美丽的文化。The next on the program is an opening performance brought to us by 祖韵 Culture. This dance troupe is made with professional dancers from different Aboriginal tribes around Taiwan. From their costumes and performance, we hope to show you the beauty of Taiwanese culture. 请大家以掌声欢迎祖韵文化。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 祖韵 Culture.
Amen.
为我们带来精彩的演出。Thank you for that wonderful performance by 祖韵 Culture。再次的谢谢他们所带来的精彩表演。接下来呢，我们要邀请的是主办单位行政院海洋委员会的李仲威主委上台致开幕词。And now we would like to invite Minister of Ocean Affairs, Mr. 李仲威 to give us the opening remarks. 请大家以热烈的掌声欢迎主委。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Minister Lee.
各国 distinguished delegates from abroad, experts and scholars, honored guests, good morning. First, on behalf of the Ocean Affairs Council, I would like to thank you all for gracing us with your presence today. I would like to extend my most sincere welcome and gratitude to all of you. The Ocean Affairs Council was established in Kaohsiung on April 28th last year. It is the first central agency of the Republic of China Taiwan to have been established to coordinate the planning, review, management, and promotion of the overall marine policies and basic laws.
也是第一个成立在高雄的行政院二级机关。这一次东沙国际学术研讨会是本会成立以来所举办的第一次大型的国际学术研讨会。我记得在去年的4月28号，总统亲自莅临高雄来主持本会的成立之时，特别提示了我们3个努力的方向。第一个方向是健全海洋法治，做好生态保育的工作。第二个方向是配合政策，推动海洋的产业，以及第3个政策方向就是强化海洋研究的能量，培育海洋的人才。海洋委员会遵总统的期许，在今年的4月24号，我们正式揭牌成立了国家海洋研究院，也陆续的在推动各项科研的计划。今天国际研讨会也是我们为了强化海洋研究的能量的重要工作之一。海洋是孕育万物的摇篮，生命的起源，也蕴含了丰富的资源。然而，人类对于海洋的认识却是极其有限。在今年的4月发布的2019年联合国秘书长海洋及海洋法报告中，宣布了从2021年的开始的10年，将会是联合国海洋科学促进可持续发展的10年。在这个架构下面，未来国际间的海洋科学促进、海洋科学合作将会更加的紧密，以充实现有的海洋知识的不足。我们由此可见，了解海洋以及强化海洋的研究，绝对是未来国际重要的趋势。此外，在2015年联合国永续发展高峰会也揭示了永续发展2030的议程，针对全球性的课题，拟出了17个目标和169个子目标，其中目标14，保育与永续利用海洋及海洋资源，以确保永续发展，就是海洋的专招。台湾身为一个海洋国家，需要积极的去参与和响应，以符合国际的趋势的共识。这一次的研讨会，我们特别选定了美丽的东沙环礁作为主题。我们希望这一次能够让国内外许多关心和热爱海洋的朋友，能够更加的了解、认识东沙，并将东沙的美以及中华民国政府保育、永续的理念和努力推广到世界的每一个角落。我们特别邀请了美国、加拿大、英国、比利时、印尼、马来西亚、 菲律宾、越南、印度等国家，在海洋法政、海洋生态以及海洋科研、海洋安全和海洋产业以及海洋文化等领域的顶尖产官学界的专家，共同来参与本次的研讨会，来进行分享和讨论。我们希望借由群体智慧的集结，共同来探索未来台湾海洋全面发展的策略和方向。我也要特别谢谢基里巴斯的代表，今天更能够亲自出席。其次，我们为了响应联合国的世界海洋日，我们也会在明天在高雄港的香蕉码头举办一系列的庆祝的活动，包括了舰艇动态的表演，包括了保育绩优的单位的颁奖，包括了一系列的这个展示的摊位，丰富而多元。所以说我在这里也要邀请今天与会的各位贵宾，希望你们明天能够一同来参与，共襄盛举。另外，我要在此也要特别感谢本次所有的协办机关与团体，包含了有外交部、有内政部、有教育部、有交通部，还有农委会的渔业署、文化部的文化资产局、内政部的营建署、海洋国家公园管理处以及中钢股份有限公司。因为有你们的全力支持和协助，才能够促成本次活动的顺利举办。最后，我要再次的感谢今天所有拨冗莅临指导的各位贵宾、与会的专家学者，以及参与本次活动的各界朋友们。我祝福这一次的活动能够顺利、圆满、成功，也敬祝各位身体健康，万事如意。谢谢大家。
谢谢主委，谢谢主委。我们请主委留步在台上，因为接下来呢，我们要进。
Throughout the conference.
To invite some guests of honor to the stage for a group photo together to remember this special event today. 接下来呢，我们要邀请几位贵宾一起上台合影，为今天的研讨会留下珍贵的画面。这一次呢，如同主委刚刚所说的，我们有来自于亚洲、欧洲和美洲的国外的专家学者一起和我们来分享。接下来呢，我们就邀请他们来到台上。First of all, please welcome Professor Elaine Shane from University of Hawaii at Manoa. Welcome. Next, please welcome Professor Eric Frakes from Hawaii University, Cusco. Next, please welcome Mr. Martin Sebastian, Director of Maritime Institute of Malaysia. And next, please welcome Mr. Bill Hayton, Associate Research Fellow of Chatham House. Next, please welcome Dr. Gurpreet Khurana, Captain of the Indian Navy, engaged in academic and strategic research. And next, please welcome Mr. Hajin Jala, founder of Center for Southeast Asian Studies. Next, please welcome Dr. Ann Cohen, Associate Scientist with Tanger of Climate and Paleo Group. Next, please welcome Professor Elaine Lorenzo from University of the Philippines, Dalaman. And next, please welcome Dr. James Davis Raymer, Associate Professor with tenure from University of the Lucas. Next, please welcome Dr. Patrick Corin, Chair of Asia Pacific Security of Hudson Institute. And next, please welcome Mr. Nguyen Hong San, Acting Director of Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. Next, please welcome Dr. Michael Perrin from University of Oxford, School of Archaeology. 再来，让我们欢迎海委会庄庆达副主委、海委会蔡清标副主委、海委会海巡署陈国恩署长、海委会海洋保育署王向文署长、海委会刘国烈主任秘书、海委会国家海洋研究院李
叶飞主任秘书。Next, please welcome Ambassador of Kiribati Her Excellency Tessie Lambour. 接下来，让我们欢迎内政部营建署吴新修署长，以及文化部文化资产局施国伦局长，欢迎。在这边再一次的欢迎所有的长官和贵宾来到台上，一起加入我们的合影。好，请所有贵宾就绪之后呢，大家一起看我们中间的摄影镜头。And now, ladies and gentlemen, please look at the cameras in the center together. Alright everyone, please look at the cameras in the center together. And don't forget to smile. 好，我们大家一起比个赞好吗？ Thumbs up everyone for the photo shoot, please. 谢谢所有的贵宾 ，Thank you very much for joining the photo shoot. 谢谢，再次谢谢所有长官和贵宾的配合，谢谢，请大家回座。各位来。
各位来宾，我们现在正式的来进入论坛的议程。那么首先呢，要进行的是今天的第一场专题演讲，主题是海洋法政。Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the first keynote session of this morning, in which we will be focusing on the law of the sea and marine policy. 首先呢，我们要邀请的是本场专题的主持人，财团法人国防安全研究院的林正义执行长。Please first join me to invite to the stage the host of this session, President of Institute for National Defense and Security Research, Mr. 林正义。让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎林执行长。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Lin.
Good morning, Mr. D and Minister D. I want to congratulate the inauguration of the International Dongsha Conference under the Ocean Affairs Council. And yesterday, our overseas participants went to Dongsha, and not so many people in Taiwan have that luxury to travel to Dongsha. And this morning, in our opening, we have two keynote speakers. The first one, Ambassador Jala from Indonesia. Ambassador Jala served Indonesian ambassador to Germany, to Canada, and to United Nations. And he went to University of Virginia and received his PhD in 1961 from Department of Government and Foreign Affairs. But the most importantly, he is the Divine Agent. As people might be aware, starting from 1991, managing potential conflict in the South China Sea under his leadership. And this year, it's entering the 29th year of that South China Sea workshop. Like father, like son, and his son was also a very important figure in Indonesia, was Indonesian ambassador to the United States, and later on served as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. So without further ado, I will give the microphone to Ambassador Jala. Today, he's going to speak the potential role of Dongsha in the peace building in the South China Sea. So, Ambassador, it's yours.
Thank you very much for introducing me in such a highly appreciated language. I feel getting old with your remark on me. But let me just say, I would like to thank the organizer of this conference for inviting me to the 2019 International Dongsha Conference. I am personally happy for having attended the Dongsha Islands for the second time. Several years ago, I had also been invited, together with other personalities around the South China Sea, to visit the islands in order to increase our understanding of the possible role of the islands in peacemaking and cooperative relations in the South China Sea. At that moment, we were very engaged in the possible cooperation in the South China Sea in informal process in the various fields regarding marine environment and protection, scientific research activities, marine living resources management, safety of navigation and shipping in the South China Sea, and other matters. Around the same time, we were discussing various areas for the study of biodiversity in the South China Sea. At that time, we were talking around about the possibilities of undertaking informal, I repeat, informal scientific research dealing with marine environment and biodiversity studies. We were talking about the possibilities of conducting marine scientific research with regard to biodiversity in the area, particularly in 4 or 5 areas at the time that we talk about. In the southwest of the South China Sea, in the southeast, in the center, in the northwest, and in the northeast of the South China Sea. In order to facilitate these studies, we agreed to conduct them in informal process between the scientists, purely for scientific research. This is in order to avoid political issues that may come up as a result of this. With regard to the area of the northwest of the South China Sea, of the southwest of the South China Sea, Indonesia offered to conduct the biodiversity studies around the Anambas Islands in the South China Sea. The scientific cooperation efforts were conducted in the undisputed islands group without touching upon territorial sovereignty and jurisdiction. In fact, the participants even landed in some parts of the islands. The costs for conducting those studies were generally offered and taken care of by Indonesia, although there have been also contribution by other participants. The results of the expedition have discovered a number of new species of marine living resources, which I listed in my attached paper. In fact, the result of the expedition had been published by the Raffles Museum in Singapore, not in Indonesia, and is freely open for the world community to increase understanding of the living resources in the South China Sea. Everybody agreed at the time, and I don't see any challenge up to this moment, that this process have been regarded as an important contribution to marine scientific research in the South China Sea. The next program approved by the South China Sea workshop process was the biodiversity studies in the southeast of the South China Sea, particularly around the Philippines island of Palawan. The modalities of the Palawan expedition was agreed to be similar to the Anambas expedition. Namely, it was an informal scientific studies to understand the biodiversity in the area and around the South China Sea, to be participated, this is important, to be participated informally by the participants of the workshop process. I regret, unfortunately, the Philippines changed the process from informal scientific research into a formal activity and extended the area of the study to include Luzon Island. Unfortunately, this new process was without consultation in the workshop process. Consequently, some participants who have arrived in Manila for the study withdrew their participation, and in fact asked back the money that they had contributed to the program. Later, when the Philippines reported the result of the Palawan biodiversity expedition, objections were raised to the report by the participants, particularly by China, because the process was conducted formally while the agreement was informally. After this, the issues of conducting biodiversity expedition in the South China got stuck. Also, some suggestions had been made, such as the conduct of diversity around the Spratly Islands in the center, Paracel Islands in the northwest, in the northeast, and around northwest, Paracel northwest, and Pratash Islands in the northeast. It was strongly emphasized that the study should be in an informal process, particularly in order to avoid difficulties with regard to territorial issues. In fact, I personally at the time entertained the idea of possibility of conducting biodiversity studies around the Pratash Island, particularly because the legal status of this island was not disputed by Southeast Asian countries. Unfortunately, this notion was apparently not responded satisfactorily by the relevant authorities. Other issue was well discussed in the South China Sea areas of cooperation, as I remember, to include safety of navigation and shipping in the area. As I remember, Taiwan, Chinese Taipei, was also entrusted to initiate hydrographic studies in the South China Sea for the purpose of safety of navigation and shipping. Unfortunately, I am not aware of any progress or effort that have been conducted by the authorities here in Taipei to implement the common effort to study the hydrographic matters in the South China Sea. I have not heard of the proposal to withdraw this program from Taiwan, and therefore, after so many years, I'm still looking forward to the implementation of this program. While the activities of Taiwan in the South China Sea workshop process is closely linked to Chinese-Taiwan relations, I was further encouraged by the symptom of improving relations across the strait between Beijing and Taipei. I was hoping that this kind of development would have a positive impact on cooperation and peaceful development in the South China Sea. I was particularly happy to see agreement and understanding between Beijing and Taipei with regard to joint program of Beijing and Taipei with regard to CNET, that is Southeast Asian Networking on Education and Training, in joint program between Beijing and Taipei to promote networking and education on the matter of ocean affairs, particularly in the South China Sea. Somehow, these two cooperative initiatives seem at this moment again to get stuck. The cross-strait relations, including the cooperation between universities across the strait and the joint CNET program, also faced difficulties. I hope that this development will not hinder the possibility for conducting joint biodiversity studies in informal manner around the Pratash Islands or Dongsha, as has been mentioned in various occasions in the past. Personally, I have also been looking at the possibilities of employing the modalities of informal process for developing cooperative relations at the moment in the East China Sea. That nothing to do with me. I've been asking these possibilities informally, and the views that might be expressed by the participants to avoid conflicts in the East China Sea. I don't know much about this, and perhaps Taipei could take a more active role in promoting the model of the South China Sea workshop process in the East China Sea area for potential dispute management in the area. Recently, we have read in the news that President Duterte of the Philippines has instructed to send back the pollutants that are imported from Canada to be dumped in the Philippines. I was not clear to me whether it would be dumped in the Philippine lands or water or into both or into the sea. Malaysia has been reported to ship back tons of plastic waste to their countries of origin, such as Bangladesh, Canada, China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the US, and others. In the meantime, Indonesia is also importing plastic waste, mainly from Hong Kong, Spain, France, Belgium, Japan, Netherlands, USA, Australia, Germany, which was intended for processing. It is suspected, however, that some of these plastic materials may have ended as waste that may have increased marine debris. In fact, Indonesia has been reported as the world's second largest plastic waste producer after China. This was a press report. Indonesia has committed itself to reduce the marine plastic debris by 70% by 2025, and will cooperate with the Asian Development Bank to reduce marine plastic debris across Asia and Pacific countries, despite many challenges that lay ahead. That was also according to the Indonesian report. South China Sea, surrounding countries, this is my suggestion, could also cooperate in accordance with Part 12 of UNCLOS 1982 to fight the marine debris in the South China Sea and to protect its marine environment and the living resources, fisheries from the area. As we know, Article 194 of UNCLOS 1982 states, among others, that, and I'm reading this article, states shall take individually or jointly as appropriate all measures consistent with this convention that are necessary to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the marine environment from any source, using for this purpose the best practical measures at their disposal and in accordance with their capabilities, and they should endeavor to harmonize their policies in this connection. This is the Law of the Sea article that obliges cooperative relationship to protect environment in the sea. This article is particularly more important for the South China Sea, according to me, mainly because the South China Sea is, again, in accordance with Article 122, is an enclosed and semi-enclosed seas. In this context, according to Article 123, the states bordering the South China Sea should cooperate directly through appropriate regional organization. First, to coordinate the management, conservation, exploration, and exploitation of the living resources of the sea. Second, to coordinate the implementation of their rights and duties with respect to the protection and preservation of the marine environment. Third, to coordinate their scientific research policies and undertake, where appropriate, joint programs of scientific research in the area. And finally, fourth, to invite, as appropriate, other interested states or international organizations to cooperate with them in furtherance of the provisions of this article. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to continue Taipei's positive role in participating and supporting the activities of the South China Sea workshop process, as it has indicated and done so far, and in supporting the implementation of the workshop process, just like Beijing has been pursuing. In this context, I am hoping that sometime in the near future, Taipei would decide to me to conduct a joint biodiversity studies around Dongsha, Pratas Islands, including within the workshop process of the South China Sea, just like the Anambas expedition several years ago. I also hope that we can also develop cooperative activities in the South China Sea to protect the marine environment by dealing with, this is a new thing, increasing debris problems in the seas that will affect the sustainability of the marine living resources in the area, as well as other ecosystem and marine environment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Jala, for your gracious speech. And our second keynote speaker is Dr. Bill Hayden. Dr. Hayden received his PhD this year, 2019. But different from other young PhD, he already contributed 3 books. And the most important book is entitled The South China Sea, The Struggle of Power in Asia, that was published in 2014. Together with other 2 books. The first book, 2010, Vietnam, The Rising Dragon, and also incoming 3rd book, The Invasion of China. All those 3 books was published by Yale University Press. And this morning, the title he's going to deliver is The South China Sea, with the subtitle History as Problem, History as Solution. Let us welcome Dr. Hayden.
I want to thank the organizers very much for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here. I started my research 7 years ago, and yesterday I achieved 2 very important ambitions. For the first time, I actually visited one of the islands of the South China Sea, and I met Ambassador Jalal for the very first time. So thank you very much to Taiwan for making my dreams come true. I want to talk about, how am I going to change the slide, by the way? I want to talk about history, which people often say there's too much history in the South China Sea, but I want to say that it depends on how you look at it. If you can use historical evidence, then there may be ways forward for the South China Sea disputes that we hadn't thought about. Too often we see the disputes in the South China Sea as impossible to resolve, that they're just too complicated. We also, I think, tend to look at the Chinese claim in particular as being so historic that it can't be moved or adjusted in any way. I want to argue the opposite, that the disputes are inherently resolvable so long as we look critically at the historical evidence. And I think this is very important because when you look at modern Chinese PRC actions in the South China Sea, they seem to be founded on a sense of entitlement, which goes back to a view of history, to a view of territory, which I'm going to argue is not justified. So when we saw the Chinese Minister of Defense talking at the Shangri-La Dialogue earlier this month, when he says, for example, that China has never invaded another country or taken an inch of land, the only way that statement can possibly make sense is that all the invasions that China, the PRC, has taken part in the last 70 years, whether of India or Vietnam or in the South China Sea, have been of territory which in the PRC's view is naturally Chinese. So therefore, what's going to happen in the future would be the continuing expansion of PRC control to other features in the South China Sea, waiting for some kind of provocation and then invoking the PRC's strategy of active defense to retaliate in strength. And I think this is a worrying prospect because I think there's a degree of self-righteousness in the PRC's position here. Now, there's a general assumption, this map comes from an American congressman. I'm not claiming that it's happening, but the idea that if China, the PRC, were to build on the Scarborough Shoal, that would be the third point of a strategic triangle in the South China Sea, which would give it extensive control and would obviously pose a threat to Taiwan's own security as well. The PRC is now built on 7 features in the Spratly Islands. And my argument is, would an 8th or a 9th make any difference to the PRC strategic position? I think not. So therefore, why is the PRC so insistent on regaining territory? And I think it's purely because of this historical narrative which demands the recovery of supposedly lost territories, lost in an earlier age, lost to imperialist powers. And I want to question some of that history today. I don't know if you recognize this piece of sea, but this officially is the southernmost point of Chinese territory. This is the Zhengmu Ansha, somewhere about there, yeah? And you'll notice that the southernmost point of Chinese territory doesn't actually exist. There is no territory there. The reason that the PRC and the Republic of China claims the Zhengmu Ansha as the southernmost point of Chinese territory is because of a translation mistake in the 1930s. Nonetheless, the PRC Navy, the plan, go and perform ceremonies down there on their way to and from Somalia. And if you're a geography student in the PRC, you learn that this is the northernmost, the westernmost, the easternmost, and the southernmost point of Chinese territory. This is not just a problem for the region, this is, I think, is a problem for China, for the PRC as well. And you can look at the way that historical evidence is misused in other ways. In the white paper published in 2000, the PRC government talks about this ancient document, the Yiwuji, and a quote saying that this proves that ancient Chinese mariners knew all about the reefs in the South China Sea 2,000 years ago. But the problem is no one has actually seen this historic document, the original, because it doesn't exist. What we have is copies of copies of copies of copies. The oldest one is about 1,000 years ago. And when you go back and you look at that copy, you find that it doesn't actually say what the PRC government says. In fact, it says that foreigners reinforce their big ships. So what it says is that the Malays, the Indians, the Arabs, the foreigners were trailing through this way, and they were the ones that had this knowledge. So this is evidence, actually, of a multinational, a multi-ethnic, a multicultural history of the South China Sea, not a purely Chinese history. And I think this is a valuable way of looking at the past and a guide to the future. If we take this book was published by the Republic of China government in the 1940s, and there were 2 editions, one in 1943, and this edition is in the library of the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and there was a second edition published in 1947. And you can see in the 1943 edition, the southernmost point of Chinese territory is the Paracel Islands, or the Xisha in Chinese. If you look at the 1947 edition, the southernmost point has shifted south to what was then called the Dongsha, now known as the Nansha Islands. So in those 4 years, the Chinese territorial claim in the South China Sea moved south by about 600 miles. Okay? So there's nothing sacred or historic about the PRC, the Chinese claim to the Spratly Islands. In fact, it is younger than my parents. The Southeast Asian states could make better claims, but they seem to have a problem with finding historic evidence. And I think this is also partly cultural, that the evidence, for example, in the Philippines is pre-Christian. In Malaysia and Indonesia, it's pre-Islamic. In Vietnam, it's pre-king. It belongs to the Sham people, the maritime people. These were often marginal peoples who did not leave records behind them. Requires dedicated archaeology to understand these histories. And it's a recurring problem that those states which have surviving paper records do better with mobilizing evidence than those without them. This is the sea that you'll know well, Pratas up here, the Paracels, the Spratlys, and Scarborough Shoal. The Chinese claim to the islands of the South China Sea really begins in the age of imperialism, and the number one place it began was Pratas, was Dongsha, in 1907 to 1909, in the context of a struggle with Japan. In 1933, it becomes a struggle with France, and after the Second World War, once Japan has been defeated again, we have a contest with France for the Spratly Islands. But this map in 1897, you'll see the islands are not marked. Pratas in 1909, these are just some newspaper cuttings from the English language press about the discovery of the Japanese entrepreneur on Pratas. And this leads us for the first time to the way that the Qing authorities started to use the ideas of Western international law to gather evidence by looking at old documents to make a territorial claim to Pratas, to Dongsha Island, involving evidence from fishermen and old documents. But this claim to Pratas to Dongsha is then extended in the same year, in 1909, to the Paracels, to the Xisha Islands, and we see a 3-day expedition taking place in 1909. But almost immediately, partly because of the politics, but also because of the difficulties of doing anything with the Paracels are more or less forgotten for the following decade. You see a mention in the newspaper just of turning them into a penal settlement. There's no chance of making any economic progress there. Even 10 years later in 1920, people are complaining about why is there no lighthouse on the Paracel Islands. No one is administering these islands at all. They've been more or less forgotten. It's not really until 1928 that we see a return of interest to the Paracel Islands here from Guangzhou. But interestingly, the front of this book, he says, the Paracel Archipelago is our nation's southernmost territory. And when France annexes some of the Spratly Islands in 1933, we see confusion in the ROC government. In fact, this telegram here, the ROC Navy is telling us that there are, in fact, no islands at all where the French claim they are. So we have this point where, from the Chinese position, they have no interest, no knowledge of the Spratlys. These days, obviously, it's absolutely vital that this is national territory, which must be recovered. The Admiral Li Jun, who was responsible for the expeditions to Pratas and the Paracels in 1909, confuses everybody in 1933 by giving interviews to newspapers when he tells everybody that the islands the French have annexed, the Spratlys, are the same ones that he discovered in 1909, which were the Paracels. This is the origin of the confusion we have today. In order to try to clear up this confusion, the ROC government in 1934-35 drew up a list of features in the South China Sea with their English names and then gave them Chinese names. And if you can read them, you'll see that the Chinese names are the translations or the transliterations of the English names. So, for example, Jinyindao, Money Island, is in fact named after an Englishman called William Taylor Money. Linyangjiao, Antelope Reef, is named after a British ship called the Antelope, but the names still exist in Chinese names. So Kang, Beikang, Nankang, North Kang, South Kang is actually Luconia Shoals. It was originally transliterated as Lo Kang Ni Ya, but then in 1947 the name was changed just to be Kang, but the origin is from the English name. Interestingly, the Qing Admiral Li Jun, he gave his own names to the islands, but these names were forgotten. And in 1933, the ROC only took the names on the foreign maps. And we can tell where these names came from because there are some mistakes on the ROC list of 1933, and it's the same mistakes which are in this document here, which was published by the UK government in 1906. So we can be fairly sure that the list came from here. The James Shoal, the reason it becomes land is because of a translation mistake. So the James Shoal becomes the Zhengmu Tan. And you will understand, of course, that Tan means a sandbank in Chinese, whereas the word shoal in English means shallow. So Zhengmu becomes James, JM, shoal becomes Tan. This is why Zhengmu Tan becomes the southernmost point of Chinese territory. The name is later changed to Zhengmu Ansha. And you see down here, when Bai Mei-chu makes his map, a geography professor, then he labels the island here, but also draws it as an island. And here you see the Vanguard Bank, Chanwei Tan, also a translation, labeled as an island. And this is why the U-shaped line, and I think he copied this map, a British map, which sort of has these dotted areas here. And I'm grateful to Professor Tsai, who will be speaking later, for introducing me to these characters. These were students of Bai Mei-chu, who then went on to work for the ROC Ministry of the Interior in 1940s, and they were the ones that turned the U-shaped line of Bai Mei-chu into the U-shaped line of today. There he is going to Taiping Dao in 1946. And you see the map there. So a few things come from this. One is that back in 1946, the ROC only was interested in claiming islands. It had no interest in trying to claim the whole water area in the U-shaped line as territory. And Chris Chung, University of Toronto, has just proven this based on the archives in Taipei very comprehensively, in my view. The claim making continues. The difference is crucial because the ROC included the James Shoal and the Vanguard Bank as territory back in 1933. The U-shaped line takes this shape. If it only looked at the above water features, the proper islands, this limits the disputed area to here. That would remove all the recent conflicts involving Vietnam here, with Indonesia here, with Malaysia, Brunei, and the Philippines around here. So we really need to look again at this and look critically at the way the claims are made. The only way forward is to recognize there is nothing sacred about these claims, that they can be broken up, that you can make claims to individual islands. If the International Court of Justice can decide that this rock here belongs to Singapore, whereas that one there and that one there belong to Malaysia, which it did in 2008, then the rest of the disputes can be resolved, so long as you are prepared to accept compromise and recognize that a claim to one feature is not a claim to all of them, and that you can disaggregate your claim and back it up with evidence. Thank you.
Dr. Hayden, we started around 10 minutes late, but I'm not going to extend 10 minutes. But I would like to open the floor with two comments or questions since the time is constrained. So please identify yourself, if possible, regarding the opening keynote speech of this morning. Yes, I saw Dr. Song Yan-Hui from Academia Sinica. Dr. Song, you have the microphone. Any other? So you will be the only one. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lin. I thank you very much, the two speakers, for the excellent keynote speech. But two brief questions after the first one, what would be the PRC and other participating authorities regarding to your joint proposal of marine biodiversity project in the northeast South China Sea? Let me try to do that again. Yes. My first question is addressed to Ambassador Hasim Jalal. What would be the China or PRC's reaction to your proposal you mentioned in your speech regarding a joint marine biodiversity project in the northeast South China Sea in the workshop process? That's the first one. The second one is, next year we are going to have the 30th anniversary of the South China Sea workshop process, the meeting. What would be your plan? Would it be possible for you to invite maybe President Xi Jinping, maybe President Trump, maybe ASEAN Secretary, President Chai, other EU representatives to attend the 30th anniversary of the South China Sea workshop on managing potential conflict in the South China Sea? And my name is Yang-Hui Song from Academia Sinica. Thank you, Dr. Lin. Thank you.
You got a question? Thank you for the questions. The first one is the possibility of biodiversity studies around the Dongsha. This matter were discussed when we began the study of biodiversity in the South China Sea many years ago. And at that time, as I was mentioned, in order to increase our knowledge, we need to know more about biodiversity, at least in 5 areas. Southwest South China Sea, Southeast South China Sea, Northeast, Northwest, and in the center. We got stuck suddenly to the territorial dispute. And in fact, I keep talking, biodiversity studies is not a territorial dispute. Because the resources of biodiversity is everywhere. It goes across the territorial dispute. Even assuming you know the boundary. And to prove that, after so many discussions, we offer, do it in Natuna Sea, Anambas Islands group, which all belongs to Indonesia, and no one disputed it. But we are open to share the knowledge with everyone that is interested. Now, looking into that possibility, we talk about the possibility around Dongsha Islands. An informal process for scientific purposes, as inscribed in the Law of the Sea Convention that I quoted also. But people are not coming up with suggestions. I was waiting, to be very honest, and with all my due respect, that Taiwan may come up. We were hoping also in the northeast, in the Paracel group of islands, again the disputed area between Vietnam and China. And Vietnam hinted, but not say publicly, that they may not be able to support that. And therefore we don't pursue very much anymore on the paracel. We are waiting for positive reactions, the spirit of cooperation and the interest of all, because these issues cross boundary and important for all of us. That's what we have been working. And I may even hoping that one day Taiwan will come up with a proposal of biodiversity without implying territorialities. That is the most important key issues. The second one was inviting others.
President Xi Jinping and Trump next year mark the 30th anniversary of the South China Sea workshop. That is the question.
Yeah, we will do it, the anniversary, but we are not yet deciding as to whom shall we invite. At this moment, you know, this is a very open kind of things. And it is normally, we do invite also some people who might be interested to come and so forth. But we have not decided on that. And it depends also on the participation, whether to invite others or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, time is constrained. We are already behind the schedule. So, but we have a long day. No one asked Dr. Hayden question, but maybe later he could enlighten us. How should advise the government in the Philippines when Pakasa Island was surrounded, has been surrounded by the Chinese fishing boat, and some of them are Chinese maritime militia. So maybe later on, you can dealing with that issue. And the government in Taiwan, as showing from the history, currently we are supporting the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. We are supporting peaceful settlement or dispute. We are supporting the rule-based international order, including the UN UNCLOS. And we are open regarding mortality, bilateral or multilateral, and we really appreciate managing the potential conflict in the South China Sea workshop. That is the only 1.5 regional forum Taiwan and the PRC could participate together with each other starting from 1991. So with that, once again, please join me applaud these two speakers for their contribution. We will be adjourned at this point. Please join me.
Thank you very much to President Lin for moderating the session for us. And thank you once again to our two speakers, Mr. Jala and Mr. Hayden. 各位来宾，我们现在进行中场的休息，在场外备有茶点，欢迎各位享用。下一个场次呢，将会在11:15的时候开始，所以请大家记得要准时入座，谢谢。Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break. Coffee, tea, and refreshments are provided outside the lecture hall. Please enjoy. The next session will begin at 11:15, so please remember to come back on time. Thank you very much. Will begin shortly. Please take your seats. Please also remember to switch your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you.
喂喂，有声音吗？喂喂 ，OK 吗 ？OK， 确定？可以给我一点 ？OK， 再大声一点吗 ？OK 吗？好。
各位来宾，我们接下来的专题演讲马上就要开始了，在这边邀请各位尽快入座，谢谢。Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will begin very shortly. Please take your seats. Thank you. 各位来宾，欢迎大家回到我们研讨会的现场。Welcome back, everyone. 接下来呢，我们要进行的是今天的第2场专题时间，要探讨的主题是海洋生态。We now proceed to the second keynote speech this session this morning, focusing on the topic of marine ecology. 首先呢，让我们欢迎这一场的主持人，国立中山大学海洋科学系的宋克义教授。Please join me in welcoming our host for this session, Professor Ke Yi-sung from the Department of Oceanography of National Sun Yat-sen University. 我们把时间交给宋教授。
好，谢谢。我们在第1场中从非常宏观、非常多领域、非常长的时间角度看了南海。那在第2场呢，我们要反过来哈，从很小的东沙。在很短的几年的时间里面做了些什么，是对南海、对全世界会有帮助的。那今天我们非常荣幸啊，请到这个 Ann Cohen， 他是这个我们的手册上有一些错误哈，他是这个 Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute 的教授。那我请他要回答一个问题哈，就是。干嘛从大西洋这个全美国、全世界最负盛名的这个研究单位，要跑到南海这么小一个环礁上来做什么研究？那对区域性整个南海，对整个全世界呢，会有什么样的影响 ？Let's welcome Professor Ann Cohen from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, please.
各
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, and members of the Ocean Affairs Council, and esteemed colleagues, it is my absolute privilege to be here today. I'm going to share with you a very exciting program that we have initiated called Super Reefs. These are coral reefs that appear to be surviving and able to survive global climate change. I'm going to show you today how Dongsha Atoll fits into this program in a very, very important way. My slide changer is missing. So sorry.
You just hold this one. Just hold this one.
It's gone. Thank you so much. Nope. Okay, great. So, as many of you might have guessed, this is underwater footage of a real live coral reef ecosystem. And coral reefs across the world take up only 1% of the surface area of the ocean, and yet 25%, a quarter of all the ocean species that exist today, are found on coral reef ecosystems. So coral reefs are exceptionally important from an ecological and biodiversity standpoint. Now, all this is made possible by tiny animals. Many of them are only 1 millimeter in diameter. And they're not very complex. I sometimes think of them as a Ziploc bag filled with water. But these tiny animals, the coral polyps, and the ones that build reefs today, live in colonies. So many hundreds of thousands of them live together to build the reef. They are responsible for all those reef systems across the global tropics. What you see here are the mouths of the polyps and the tentacles. And those tentacles are filled with nematocysts. Those are stinging cells that enable the coral to capture prey and eat it. And here you can see, well, you could see the coral animal actually capturing a brine shrimp and ingesting it using its tentacles. But in fact, the corals that build coral reefs today get most of their energy from tiny plant cells, single-cell dinoflagellates that live inside of the cells of the coral in a very close symbiosis. So you can see in this image here, oh, something's going on. It's changing by itself, and it really shouldn't be. So don't change it, okay? So here's the coral polyps, here, the animals, and here are the cells called zooxanthellae that actually live inside the cells of the coral. And those zooxanthellae photosynthesize, and they provide the coral with a glucose-rich mixture called photosynthate, and that's actually providing up to 75% of the coral's energetic reserve. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but many corals, the way they reproduce, the females actually get pregnant and they grow the baby corals in their stomachs. And then when the full moon comes out, the mother releases her precious baby out of her mouth to be swept on the ocean currents to neighboring reefs where it will settle and grow. So this picture shows a very, very close-up image of the mouth of the coral polyp, the mother polyp, and this little white blob is the little baby coral. And that is the start of the new coral reef. We took a video in the lab of a baby coral, a planula larva, after it had been born. So this is just 24 hours old. And I hope it will play. There we go. So this little green blob has the algal cells already in it, given to it by its mother. It also has about 70%, its body is about 70% fat. And the reason for that is that it now has to travel long distances and survive on those fat reserves before it can settle and grow a new reef. When that planula larva, that little baby coral, settles after about 3, maybe 29 days, depending on what species it is and how far it has to travel, it metamorphoses into what we call the primary polyp, or the new coral. And what you see here on the left-hand side is a 3-day-old coral. The most beautiful thing I ever saw, except for my children. And underneath that coral, that brand new coral, is skeleton. The coral is starting to build a skeleton. And that skeleton is eventually what's going to build Dongsha Atoll, the Great Barrier Reef, the island of Bermuda. That's where that skeleton is headed. Now, corals don't just make any skeletons. They do a really careful job of producing aragonite crystals, a form of calcium carbonate. And those crystals are absolutely beautiful, and they organize in a very careful architecture so that the coral can build a very strong skeleton to help it against strong waves and currents on the reef. And all the sizes and shapes and colors of corals that you see in the ocean when you go snorkeling, when you go to Dongsha Atoll and get in the water, all of those corals are built from the same calcium carbonate crystals. And they come from the same mother. And over hundreds and thousands, or thousands of years, the skeletons of millions and millions of corals aggregate together to form a reef. And this is a view from the Great Barrier Reef from an airplane. And all those millions and millions of corals all across the global tropics have built for us, for the 25% of marine species that are found in the oceans, millions of coral reef islands. You can see here across the global tropics, those islands would not exist if it wasn't for those coral polyps producing that calcium carbonate day in and day out, 365 days a year. It is estimated that 1 billion people around the world derive their livelihoods from coral reefs. 60 million of those people have no alternative source of livelihood. This map shows where the highest dependence, in dark pink, the highest dependence of people on resources from coral reefs. And you can see that those are concentrated in the Asia-Pacific region. So these tiny little animals not much more than a Ziploc bag filled with water, are producing calcium carbonate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They are building these islands, and they are working for us. They are providing ecosystem services for humanity across the globe. 150,000 kilometers of coastline are protected from waves and storms and tsunamis by coral reefs. Coral reefs host an estimated 9 million species, from microbes to manta rays to tiger sharks. They're all there because of the reef. Globally, coral reefs are estimated to be worth $375 billion to the global economy each year. But all's not well in paradise. The biggest issue, the biggest challenge facing the health of coral reef ecosystems today, their ability to provide us those ecosystem services, is climate change. Climate change primarily in the form of ocean warming. Over the past century, due to human emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the ocean on average has warmed by about 1 degree Celsius. That doesn't seem like a lot, but to a coral, on a coral reef, it's huge. As the ocean is warming steadily upward, the size and intensity of El Niño heat waves is increasing. As you can see from this plot, the red areas are the El Niño heat waves, and the last 3 super El Niños have occurred in the last 30 years. Why is heat bad for corals? It sounds kind of odd because corals like to live in warm water. Coral reefs are spread across the global tropics. But in fact, that relationship between the coral host and its algal symbiont, the symbionts that feed them, provide 75% of their energetic reserve. That relationship is very temperature sensitive. What happens is when the water gets much warmer than corals are used to, the algae, those little green cells that are living inside the coral, start to produce toxins. So the atmosphere inside the coral cells becomes toxic, and the coral has to make a decision: am I going to hang on to these algae and die? Or should I spit them out, get rid of them, and take a chance that I won't starve to death? 99% of the time, the corals make the decision to get rid of their algae when it gets too hot. And you can see in these images here, the healthy coral in normal temperatures, and what happens when the water gets too hot and the algae ejects, and the coral ejects its algae. And this is a process called bleaching, because when the algae leave the coral animal becomes translucent, and it looks white because the skeleton underneath is white. If the water temperatures stay high and the coral does starve to death, the coral will die. So in this image, what we're seeing is a coral colony that has died after being bleached for a few days, and now it has become covered with turf algae. When the coral is alive, it can keep things off itself. But once that coral polyp is dead, there's lots of things, lots of other organisms that want to colonize the coral. And that's what you're seeing in this image. This is a very, very dead coral. Now the trouble is that CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emissions are on the increase. The rate of emissions is increasing. And the global climate model projections are that Earth's temperature and ocean temperatures will increase in concert. The track that we're on right now in this IPCC projection scenario is the red track. Excuse me. Oops. And I've put an arrow here where the ocean temperatures are expected to achieve 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That's when we expect mass coral reef mortality across the global tropics. And that time is not too distant. It's not too far from now. It's about, you can't see, unfortunately, the x-axis being cut off, but it's about the middle of this century when we're expecting the oceans to be so warm that most coral reefs cannot survive. During the 2015 Super El Nino, we had a taste of what's to come. So this is a sea surface temperature anomaly map. What it's showing is where the sea surface is hotter than normal. Where it's red, it's about 4 to 5 degrees hotter than normal. Where it's orange, it's about 1 to 3 degrees hotter than normal. So you can see in this map, the entire Pacific Ocean was lit up during the 2015 El Nino. And coral reefs across the Pacific Basin into the Indian Ocean and also in the Atlantic responded to this heat. Oops, went too fast, sorry. Ouch. I'm so sorry. There we go. Please stay there. Okay. Probably the mass mortality event that you most heard about in the 2015 El Nino was what happened on the northern Great Barrier Reef. The northern Great Barrier Reef had never seen such heat before. The entire section of the northern Great Barrier Reef, shown in red there, lost up to 87% of their corals. On average, 67% of corals died on the northern Great Barrier Reef in 2015. That is millions and millions of corals killed in the 2015 heat wave. But it wasn't just the Great Barrier Reef that suffered. This is an island called Jarvis Island in the Central Pacific that we'd been studying for many, many years. It's our favorite, one of our favorite places to study. Jarvis Island was massively productive with tremendous coral cover and huge fish biomass in April 2015. Then the water started to heat up because of the El Nino heat wave, and the entire island, every single coral, down to 90-foot depth, was bleached by November 2015. We went back to Jarvis Island in April 2016, just a few months later, and 98% of the corals had died. The entire coral reef was covered with turf algae and cyanobacteria. Dongsha Atoll in the northern South China Sea did not escape the heat wave in 2015 either. In early 2015, the waters around Dongsha Atoll, in fact, across the northern South China Sea, started to heat up. And the global bleaching warning system turned on for the northern South China Sea. So this area was under a bleach warning. At the same time, the satellite data, the high-resolution satellite data, showed that Dongsha was starting to heat up. We were studying the East Reef Flat at the time. We did not anticipate this event, but because we had instruments on the reef, we knew exactly what was going on. So the gray bar here shows the open ocean warming in June 2015. This is the normal temperature for that time of year, and this is what the open ocean was doing. On the East Reef Flat of Dongsha here in red reached up to 6 degrees higher than normal. Those corals were baking in a sauna. And the reason it got so hot was because the winds died down and the waves weakened. So the warm water that was carried, the water that was already warm, that was carried onto the reef, sat there and baked in the sun. And Dongsha corals that were super, super healthy in early June, shown here, started to bleach. And Kerry and his team were using these flying objects, you recognize them, to survey the Dongsha Reef and Lagoon. And we could see that most of the reef flat and lagoon was bleaching at the time. These are some scenes from Dongsha Reef Flat on June 20th. You see all the corals are white. Hi, it's not changing. Okay, there we go. And by late June, many of those bleached corals had died and were covered in algae. Okay. We conducted eco-surveys across the reef flat, the East Reef Flat of Dongsha, and what we found was that 50% of the corals in our study area had died within 3 weeks of that heat wave. So what you're seeing here is a transect across the East Reef Flat. This is the live coral before the bleaching event, so on average about 30%. And here's what was left after the bleaching event, on average about 10%. So Dongsha Reef and the lagoon did suffer tremendous mortality in the 2015 heat wave, as did many, many coral reefs across the Pacific Basin. And 2015 was really a shock because it was a harbinger, it is a harbinger to us of things to come. But that's not the end of the story. I'm going to end on a high note. And the high note are the super reefs. Super reefs are reefs that, for oceanographic or biological reasons, are able to withstand ocean warming and El Niño heat waves. Dongsha Atoll, despite the mass mortality in the 2015 heat wave on the reef flat, is indeed a super reef. And the reason it's a super reef is because Dongsha lucky for this atoll, is located in one of the largest, strongest, most powerful internal wave fields in the world. Now, internal waves are not felt at the surface, but what you see in this satellite image is the surface expression of these internal waves as they travel from the Luzon Strait toward Dongsha Atoll. This is a computer-rendered image showing internal waves in color. And you see the Luzon Strait here, Dongsha Atoll here. The orange is where the internal waves are up. The surface of the ocean is elevated because of these waves. And the blue is where the surface is depressed as these waves are moving through. Now, what's really, really important for Dongsha Atoll with regard to these internal waves, or one reason they're so important, is because when these internal waves collide with the Dongsha Atoll East Reef, they actually carry cool water from below the surface up onto the reef. And some of it even gets into the reef flat. So what you're seeing here is an image that was put together by, oh, you can't see, sorry, my colleague Kristen Davis from UCI, who's been doing a lot of work on the physics of Dongsha Atoll internal waves, and her student Emma Reed. What you're seeing is a three-dimensional reproduction of the four-reef slope of Dongsha Atoll. And the colors that you're seeing are the temperatures of the water. So on the reef flat, where we saw a lot of death of corals, you can see that the water is very, very hot. The reef flat is shallow, the water moves across slowly, it heats up in the sun. But on the four-reef slope, what you're seeing is this water from the internal waves being pushed up onto the atoll. This cool water that comes from depth. And what this cool water does is it shelters the coral reef community during the heat wave. And we know that because we have instruments out there at the time. So what you're seeing here is a plot of data, temperature logger data. So we put temperature recorders on the reef in different places. And what you're seeing with the different colors is where the temperatures are very different depending on where you are on the reef during the El Nino heat wave. So the red temperatures are the East Reef Flat, where we saw a lot of coral death. 50% of corals died during the El Nino. The blue are the temperatures at the same time on the upper four-reef slope. And the reason the temperatures were so much lower is because those internal waves that are traveling from the Luzon Strait across to Dongsha are bringing cool water up onto the Dongsha four-reef. Consequently, because of this internal wave phenomenon, there was absolutely no coral mortality on Dongsha's upper four-reef slope during the 2015 El Nino heat wave. Those corals were naturally air-conditioned during this heat wave. They didn't even know that it was hot outside. They were completely protected. This is a video that was taken just after the 2015 El Nino. And what you see is a very, very healthy four-reef slope community that apparently did not realize that there was a global scale bleaching event going on. Now, because these internal waves are tidally driven, they're not going away. These internal waves will be there for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 decades as the oceans continue to warm and become more stratified. So what this means is that the coral reef communities on Dongsha will be protected from ocean warming for the next many, many decades. These coral reef communities, if we can protect them from other threats like overfishing or dynamiting or cyaniding, if we can protect them, they will be there. Now, there's a lot that we still need to learn about these upper coral reef slope communities. There's a lot that we need to know. One is, how widespread is this phenomenon around the whole of Dongsha Atoll, which is a huge atoll, 20 kilometers across? Are all the corals surviving around the atoll during these heat waves? The other important question we want to answer is, can these surviving corals replenish Dongsha's reef after a heat wave? We know that there has been some recovery following the 2015 El Nino. Where are those corals coming from? Is the upper coral reef slope a source of new corals after a catastrophic event? Another important question we need to answer is, how heat tolerant are these corals? If we took these corals from Dongsha and put them somewhere else, would they survive a heat wave? Can we use Dongsha's corals to replenish reefs in other places, in other parts of the ocean? Once we realized what was going on Dongsha Atoll, this incredible natural air conditioning that was saving these corals from almost certain death, we asked ourselves, where else in the ocean can we find reefs like this? We'd learned so much from Dongsha. Now we're looking out across the global oceans to try to find other coral reefs like Dongsha that might survive ocean warming. So far, we've been lucky enough to work in Thailand on islands just south of Phuket in the Andaman Sea. The Andaman Sea is also an area where large amplitude internal waves affect the coral reef ecosystems, and what we saw there was that during the heat waves, the coral reefs that were exposed to the internal waves were also not dying. So not only is Dongsha extremely special, we are learning from Dongsha and taking that information out to other places. This is a map. Actually, the image on the left is an island in the Central Pacific, in the Phoenix Islands Marine Protected Area, called Canton. Canton is also a super reef. And we wanted to know why. So we took the lessons that we learned from Dongsha Atoll, and we created a three-dimensional realistic hydrodynamic model of the reef system. And what we found was that areas that have anomalous circulation features that might be bringing cool water up onto the reef were including areas on this atoll that survived the 2015 heat wave. This is our model showing the currents just over the course of one day and how the currents drive changes in water temperature across the atoll and in the lagoon, just over the course of one day. You know, I just love this because when you look at a Google Earth image of a coral reef island, it looks like there's not a whole lot going on. But in fact, there's so much going on in terms of the currents and the temperatures and the corals that are responding to all these changes. So this is the area that we're talking about right now in the Central Pacific that saw massive heat in the 2015 El Nino. Okay. All right. This is actually a photograph. We were in the Phoenix Islands just recently, and this is a photograph of the coral community at this site here, where the circulation features appear to be protecting the corals from tremendous heat of the 2015 heat wave. So we arrived in Canton expecting to see a lot of death, but in fact we found very, very healthy coral reef communities across large parts of the atoll. We're also finding super reefs in the southern Line Islands, specifically Millennium and Flint, that survived. We're finding super reefs also in the northern Phoenix, in Howland and Baker Islands. And the Palau Rock Islands also house super reefs, but for different reasons. These corals are thermally tolerant. They're genetically adapted. Their genes are different from the genes of the same species of corals in other places. They just deal with the heat. We have a lot to learn from them as well. I think it was 2017 or 2018, I had the privilege of traveling with Professor Sung and with James Reimer to Taiping Island. And because Taiping had just also been through a massive heat wave, I was apprehensive about what we might find. Luckily, Professor Sung arranged for us to actually get in the water, so we had snorkels and goggles and wetsuit, and we could jump in the water and go and see what was going on. And James took this picture of me. He was the only one with the camera. But what I want you to notice is how healthy the coral reef looks in this region, even though it has just emerged from a massive heat wave. So we haven't had an opportunity to really study Taiping Island, but one question that's lingering in my mind is whether Taiping Island might also be a super reef, whether Taiping might have either the genetic or the oceanographic features that will allow it to survive the coming heat waves of the next few decades. So what I've done for you here is I've made a map showing you the locations of all the super reefs that we have discovered so far. And there's about 11 of them. To be honest, we just started looking. We're just starting to understand what makes a super reef super. What we've learned is that nature doesn't put her eggs all in one basket. It has many strategies for survival, and these coral reefs are adopting different strategies. But the more we look, the more we find reefs and reef areas that are naturally able to deal with heat waves. And these reefs have a good chance of surviving the next century of warming. And so it is our obligation to protect them, to make sure that they're not destroyed by local threats, by local human activities. I've taken the story of super reefs and the Dongsha super reef around the world. Most recently, I presented at the United Nations General Assembly. I also had the privilege of attending or participating in the Polynesian Leaders Group Summit late last year. The Polynesian Leaders Group is a group of 9 Polynesian countries. I presented on super reefs at that meeting, and I had the privilege of seeing a statement incorporated into the Amatuku Declaration by the Polynesian leaders, a commitment to locate, to manage, and to conserve their super reefs. There are many, many people who have participated in the science and the search for coral reefs that can survive global climate change. Many of them are my students, my postdocs, my research assistants, but many people have also contributed in the islands that we work on, and the different countries that we work in. For the Dongsha Atoll work, I'm so grateful to Professor George Wong from Academia Sinica, who is now retired and living in the US. It was George who actually brought me to Taiwan and turned my head to focus on Dongsha Atoll. And I'm so glad that he did. Absolutely fascinating system in itself, but it is teaching us so much about how coral reefs work and where the coral reefs might be located that can survive the next few decades of warming. I also want to thank Professor Sung in his capacity as the director of the Dongsha Atoll Research Station. The station has provided us so much support, and the scientists there, the students, and also the Coast Guard. It's been an incredible experience. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm sorry about the slide changing, but I hope it wasn't too inconvenient to see. Thank you.
We don't have time, but I will allow one question. Okay, please.
Thank you for your excellent speech and share your knowledge with your team's research work. Appreciate all your effort at Dongsha Atolls. My question is, you have provided several suggestions for Dongsha Atoll future. Can you provide some specific suggestion for us, like Ocean Affairs Council? What can we do to help the Dongsha Atolls coral reef, and to those scientists who do this work in the future?
Thank you for your question. My sense is that the Dongsha Atoll Research Station has actually been incredibly collaborative and open to international collaboration. And I think that's really the secret for why the uniqueness and specialty of Dongsha has kind of come out to the world, has been shown to the world, because of an open door policy inviting international researchers in and collaborations with Taiwanese scientists. We have seen during our field work there still destruction of the coral reef going on. I'm not sure, I don't know what Taiwan's policy is about trying to mitigate that destruction, but if we are to preserve the super reefs of the world, we will have to enforce the local laws and try to prevent people from destroying these reefs in other ways. If you're interested in specific scientific questions that both Taiwanese and international scientists should pursue over the next few years, maybe we can draft a one-pager and provide to the council. Would that be useful? Because I can see Curious staring at me to hurry up.
Okay, extra allowance. From Ambassador from Kiribati.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that the atolls where you found the super reefs are in my country.
Yes.
In Kiribati, in the Phoenix Islands and the Line Islands. But there is also a very grave situation in the other group where the impact of the heat wave has caused a lot of coral bleaching. Actually, just this month, we monitor the coral bleaching, and it's at alert level 2 in the Western group. So just want to, I'll talk to you again later after this.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
But just want to let the scientific colleagues here to know if they also want to study our coral reef system, they're very welcome. Thank you.
In Kiribati.
In Kiribati.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne Cohn. Let's give her a big hand. And let's
Thank you very much to Professor Lin, and thank you very much to our speaker, Dr. Anne Cohen. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the morning session. Thank you very much for your participation this morning. Please follow our staff to lunch venue on the 39th floor. The afternoon session will begin at 1:30. 各位来宾，我们今天上午场的论坛到这边告一个段落，非常感谢大家在早上的参与。接下来呢是午餐的时间，请各位凭着餐券到场外来领取餐盒。演讲的贵宾也请跟随我们的工作人员到39楼来用餐。下午的分组座谈会在1点30分的时候开始，海洋法政会在新城厅，海洋生态在星光厅，海洋科研在星河厅。请大家准时在1点30分之前入座，谢谢。在这边也提醒昨天有入住在此饭店